Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going deep on Cal Newport's deep work. Rules for focused success in a distracted world. We're going to figure out what makes deep work so important, especially now when everybody's got a million distractions, and how we can actually get better at it.
You know, it's amazing how much this book still makes sense, even more now than when it first came out. Everything's just gotten so much more distracting. It's like Newport knew exactly what was coming.
Okay, so let's break it down. What exactly are we talking about when we say deep work? Why should we even care?
Newport's got a pretty specific definition. He says deep work is like professional stuff you do where you're totally focused, no distractions, and it pushes you to use your brain power to the max.
So we're not just talking about like answering emails and browsing the internet.
No, that's totally different. That's what he calls shallow work, stuff that you don't really need to think hard about. Deep work is more like, I guess you could think of it like weightlifting, but for your brain. It's all about training yourself to focus and not get sidetracked.
I like that. Building mental muscle. So why is this mental weightlifting so important these days?
Well, think about it. In today's world, where everything's about knowledge and information, the people who can really focus and think deeply, they're the ones who have a huge advantage.
Okay, that makes sense. But is there like proof that deep work actually makes a difference?
Yeah, actually there is. These two economists, Eric Brynjolfsson and Andrew McAfee, wrote this book called The Second Machine Age. They say there are going to be three types of people who will really succeed in the future. People who can work well with all the new technology and AI and stuff, people who are like the best of the best at what they do, and people who have, well, money to invest.
Right, got it. So we need to be good with tech, really good at our jobs, and ideally have some cash to put to work. How does deep work fit into all of that?
Well, deep work is actually crucial for all three of those things.
Yeah.
If you can focus deeply, you can learn how to use all that crazy new technology really well. You can also get so good at your job that you become, a superstar. And when you're producing top-notch work and using your brain power to the fullest, you're going to make more money and have more opportunities to invest.
Wow. Okay, so deep work sounds like it can seriously change your game. Does Newport have any examples of people who've actually done this, like in real life?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
He talks about this guy, Jason Ben, who was a financial consultant. But he could tell that tech was getting more and more important, so he decided he wanted to learn how to code.
That's a pretty big change. How did he pull that off?
He basically went all in on deep work. He ditched his computer, only used textbooks and note cards and stuff. He forced himself to focus for long stretches of time, even though it probably felt uncomfortable at first.
So he basically unplugged to really get into it?
Exactly. And you know what? It worked. He learned all the coding basics and got into this super intense program called Dev Bootcamp. It's like 100 hours a week of coding. He ended up being one of the best in his class and landed a high-paying software developer job in Silicon Valley. His salary went from like $40,000 a year to $100,000 a year, all because he committed to deep work.
That's amazing. So deep work can even open up whole new careers for people. Does he have other examples like that?
Yeah. He also talks about Nate Silver, the guy who does all those election predictions.
Yeah.
He used deep work and his crazy data skills to become like the expert in his field.
Interesting. So this isn't just for tech people. It can work for anyone who needs to really get deep into their work.
You got it. Another great example is David Heinemeier Hansson, the guy who made Ruby on Rails, which is used by websites like Twitter and Hulu. He's all about focusing on results and shutting out anything that might distract him.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture. But what's actually happening in our brains when we do this deep work thing? Does Newport talk about the science behind it at all?
He does. He gets into the neuroscience of it all. He explains this concept called deliberate practice. It's basically how we get better at skills. You have to focus super hard on what you need to improve, push yourself beyond your comfort zone, and get feedback to make sure you're on the right track.
So it's not just about putting in the hours, it's about how you practice.
Totally. And when you do that, the connections in your brain actually get stronger, kind of like how a weightlifting builds muscle. That makes you faster, more efficient, and better at whatever you're practicing.
Wow, so we're literally rewiring our brains when we do deep work. Cool.
It is pretty cool. There's also this thing called myelin, which is like a fatty tissue that insulates your neurons. It helps them fire faster and more efficiently. It's kind of like the insulation around electrical wires. Make sure the signal gets through without any problems.
Oh, I get it. So the more deep work we do, the more myelin we build up. And our brains just work better overall.
Exactly. Deep work helps us create more myelin, which helps our brains function better, learn faster, and basically just get better at everything.
This is all super interesting. But here's the thing. If deep work is so valuable, why is it so hard to find these days? It seems like there are distractions everywhere.
That's the weird thing, right? Deep work is becoming more and more important, but at the same time, it's getting harder and harder to do.
Hmm.
Newport talks about a bunch of trends that are making it tough. One big one is the whole open office thing.
Yeah, those open offices where everyone's supposed to like collaborate and stuff, but usually it's just a ton of distractions.
Exactly. Like, remember Facebook's giant open office? The idea is that people will talk and share ideas more, but the reality is that it can be super distracting when you're trying to concentrate. Imagine trying to solve a tough problem or write some code with people chatting and moving around all the time.
Yeah. It's like trying to meditate in the middle of Times Square.
Exactly. And it's not just the physical environment. There's also this constant pressure to be connected all the time. We're expected to answer emails and messages and be on social media 24/7.
Yeah, it's like we're always on, even when we're supposed to be working.
Right, that makes it almost impossible to disconnect and really focus.
So how do we fight back against all of this? How do we make space for deep work when the world feels like it's trying to pull us in every direction?
That's where Newport's 4 philosophies of deep work scheduling come in. Each one has a different way of carving out time and space for deep work.
Okay, I'm listening. Tell me more about these philosophies.
Well, the most extreme one is called the monastic philosophy. It's all about minimizing anything that's not deep work so you can spend almost all your time on it.
Monastic, like a monk. So basically cut yourself off from the world.
Pretty much. Think of someone like Neil Stephenson, the science fiction writer. He doesn't do email or pretty much anything else besides writing. It sounds extreme, but it works for him. He's crazy productive.
I admire that, but I don't think I could go full monk mode. Is there something a little more, realistic?
Totally. There's the bimodal philosophy. This one's about going back and forth between intense periods of deep work and periods where you're more relaxed and doing shallower stuff.
So it's like finding a balance, switching between the two.
Exactly. Carl Jung, the psychologist, was a big fan of this. He would go to his tower for long stretches of time, completely isolated, to focus on his writing. Then he would come back and be a therapist and lecturer again.
Interesting. Are there any more modern examples of that?
Oh yeah, Adam Grant, the Wharton professor, does this. He's super productive, and he does it by structuring his work in blocks. Like, he'll teach all his classes in one semester, and then the other semester is all about deep work. He even disappears for days sometimes to focus on his writing.
So it's about planning your time strategically to make space for those deep work blocks. I like that. By the way, what about Cal Newport himself? What does he do?
He mostly uses what he calls the journalistic philosophy.
Hmm.
It's basically about finding time for deep work whenever you can, just like a journalist squeezing in writing time between interviews. He doesn't have a set schedule, he just grabs those opportunities as they come up.
That's kind of like how Walter Isaacson wrote his first book. My uncle told me that he would see him just disappear for like 20 minutes or an hour at a time to write, and then he'd come back totally refreshed.
Yep, that's exactly it. It's called the journalistic philosophy, but it can work for anyone who needs to find time for deep work throughout their day, no matter how busy they are.
Awesome. Okay, so we've got monastic, bimodal, and journalistic. What's the last one?
The rhythmic philosophy. It's about having a routine for deep work, like scheduling it at the same time every day and sticking to it no matter what.
I love that. It's like building a habit, making deep work part of your daily routine. Is there a good way to picture this?
Think of Jerry Seinfeld's productivity trick. He would write jokes every single day and mark an X on his calendar. It's like a visual chain, motivating him to keep going.
That's a great analogy. Okay, so we've got 4 different philosophies, each with its own pros and cons. Regardless of which one you choose, what are some specific things we can do to get better at deep work? How do we train our brains to focus when we're so used to being distracted?
Yeah, it's like we're constantly fighting this uphill battle, you know?
Yeah.
Our brains are so used to all the distractions. How do we even start to change that?
Well, Newport's got some really practical advice. One of the best things you can do is come up with some kind of ritual to get yourself into that deep work mode.
Rituals, like some kind of pre-game routine for your brain.
Exactly. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Maybe you always work in the same spot, like a home office or a quiet corner at the library. Or maybe it's a little more involved, like making a cup of tea, looking over your goals for the day, putting on your noise-canceling headphones, whatever works for you. The point is to have something consistent that tells your brain, okay, it's deep work time now. I like that. Having a specific routine to kind of switch your brain into focus mode. What about all those distractions? Any tips for dealing with those?
Here's one that might sound a little strange. Embrace boredom.
Yeah.
We're so used to having our phones and all these gadgets around us, we've totally forgotten how to just be bored.
Oh, tell me about it. If I'm not doing something every second, I feel like I have to check my phone or something. It's like we're terrified of just sitting with our own thoughts.
Right. But learning to be okay with being bored, with not having constant stimulation, that's super important for deep work.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do we actually do that? It feels like our brains are wired to want new things all the time.
It takes practice, but it's definitely possible. One thing Newport suggests, and this is the big one, is to quit social media.
Wait, seriously, like delete all your accounts. That seems a little extreme.
He doesn't say you have to do it forever. He suggests trying a 30-day detox, just to see what happens, to see if you actually miss it, or if you're better off without it. He talks about this guy, Ryan Nicodemus, who's all about minimalism. He packed up all his stuff to see what he really needed and ended up getting rid of almost everything. It's the same idea with social media. Step away for a while and see what you actually miss.
I get it. It's like hitting the reset button on your relationship with social media.
Exactly. Another really helpful strategy is to plan out every minute of your day. I know it sounds kind of intense, but it really helps you stay focused and prevents you from wasting time on stuff that doesn't matter.
So it's about being proactive, like designing your day around deep work instead of just letting things happen to you.
Exactly. And to make sure you're really prioritizing the most important tasks, Newport suggests giving each activity a score on a deep to shallow scale. That way, you can clearly see which tasks require the most focus and make sure you're giving them enough time.
Okay, so it's not just about scheduling time, it's about being aware of the type of work we're doing. Any other tips for making those deep work sessions as effective as possible?
One that's really helpful is to set a fixed time to finish work each day. It creates a sense of urgency and helps you focus better during your work hours.
It's like giving yourself a deadline for deep work.
Yep. And last but not least, make yourself harder to reach. I don't mean become a hermit or anything, but be more selective about which emails you respond to and set boundaries around your time and attention.
So it's about being more intentional with how we communicate, not just reacting to every notification that pops up.
Exactly. It's about taking back control of your attention and focusing on the things that truly matter.
This is all making a lot of sense. But I gotta be honest, some of this stuff, like quitting social media and scheduling every minute of my day, it sounds a little overwhelming.
I totally get it. Change can be hard, but remember, you don't have to do everything at once. Just pick one thing that resonates with you and start there. Maybe it's scheduling 30 minutes of deep work every morning, or setting up a routine in your workday. Just start somewhere and build from there.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's about progress, not perfection.
Exactly. Small steps lead to big changes. And, it's not just about being more productive. There's a deeper connection here between deep work and, well, living a more meaningful life.
I was just thinking about that. It's like we're pushing back against this whole hustle culture, this idea that we always have to be doing more. Deep work is about choosing quality over quantity.
Exactly. It's about being intentional with your time and energy. And when you do that, when you create space for depth, you start to tap into something really powerful.
I'm curious about that. How does focusing deeply actually lead to a more meaningful life?
Well, think about those times when you've been totally absorbed in something, like when you're working on a challenging problem or lost in a creative project. It's almost like you enter this different state of mind, totally present and engaged.
Oh, yeah, I know that feeling. It's like being in the zone. Time just disappears, and you end up feeling energized, not exhausted.
Right, and that feeling, that sense of flow, it's incredibly rewarding. It gives you a sense of accomplishment, of creating something valuable. That's where the meaning comes in.
So it's not just about getting things done, it's about the experience of doing them.
Exactly. And Newport connects this idea to the concept of craftsmanship. Remember those philosophers we talked about, Dreyfus and Kelly? They say that finding meaning in work is about developing your skills and appreciating the craft itself.
So even if our jobs aren't like saving the world, we can still find meaning in them by approaching them with a sense of craftsmanship.
Precisely. It's about taking pride in what you do, no matter what it is. Whether you're writing code, designing a website, or even analyzing data, you can find meaning in the process of mastering your skills and creating something well.
This is all really inspiring, but I have to admit it still feels a little daunting to actually put all of this into practice. Where do we even start?
Just take it one step at a time. Remember, start small. What's one thing you can change this week? Could you schedule 30 minutes each morning for focused work? Could you create a ritual to end your workday and disconnect? Just pick one thing and build from there.
This has been a really thought-provoking deep dive. So to our listener out there, we challenge you. What's your first step towards embracing deep work? What will you create when you reclaim your time and attention? That's all for today's deep dive into the world of deep work. We hope you found it valuable and are inspired to create more space for depth in your own life. Until next time, stay focused.